Welcome, gentle viewers and good readers and booktubers all, to this review of Worldmaker by A.C. Ellis. When fantasy becomes real, reality becomes nightmare. And here we have a great cover with a rather airbrushed looking guy, and that fascinating tattoo on his forehead is actually meant to be a representation of a computer chip, maybe computer, something computery in his brain. It's a pretty good image. I like it. And the cover art is by Dan LaMountain. Now, if you've never heard of A.C. Ellis, you're in good company here. I had never heard of A.C. Ellis. I picked up this book almost entirely because of its cover. So, go Dan LaMountain. And then it was a science fiction that kind of helped me along my way. And the background sounded pretty good. So, no spoilers to begin with. On the back of the book it says, "Had the world come to an end? Gutted buildings, looted stores, streets deserted except for packs of computer-implanted wild dogs. Not another soul around. Through a haze, memories of the previous reality flashed through Stephen's mind. Bits, fragments, disturbing reminders that everything in the world had changed." So this was a vote by you benevolent watchers. This was something beginning with E in my Dr. Seussian A to Z reading challenge. You voted for it. I read it. I'm very glad you voted for it. This is actually a really good book. It is surprisingly good, considering I didn't have high hopes for it. I didn't really have huge hopes at all. And let's start with where some of those lack of hopes came from. A.C. Ellis, who's heard of him? I had not. And in fact, the internet hasn't heard a whole lot about him either. This book was published in 1985, but it's in parts. So part one is called The Drowning Man. Book one, The Drowning Man, with a pretty little image there. And this one was apparently first published as a short story. I can't remember if I read that on the internet. No, I read it on the inside of the cover. The Drowning Man appeared in somewhat different form in Tales of the Marvelous Machine, copyright 1980. Tales of the Marvelous Machine, I'm going to guess, was a short story collection. A.C. Ellis is elusive. Apparently he lives in Denver, Colorado, according to the internet. But there's not a lot more to be said about him. He seems to have published at least 8 novels, which are listed on Goodreads, and 2 short story collections. I'm going to guess that The Drowning Man was a short story initially. And other than that, he's kind of under the radar, but he was a member of the American Science Fiction Association for some time, which is, I imagine, how he got into ACE. Anyhow, so book one, The Drowning Man, is exceptionally good. It's a really, really good short story, but it's clearly been modified enough that it doesn't end. It doesn't feel like a short story, but it does feel far more polished and perhaps with a bit of better flow than some of the rest of the novel. But all of it is good. Without having done any research on it at all, around about 1/3 of the way in, I made a note saying that this guy can't possibly be a new author. His style is too polished, his language is too efficient, the way he builds a story and a character is just too good for him to be new at this game. And it turns out that he is a consistent author, at least. He's got a bit of a repertoire out there. I've never read any of it, but if I see the name again, I will definitely give it a go. My first thought was that they were an experienced author who'd mostly written thriller and mystery books, because a lot of this book does, in terms of pacing, does feel a lot more like a thriller. It's fast paced, there's a lot happening. Our main protagonist, Stephen Collins, goes through different people and different scenarios and different things. It's all very thrillerish, if you know what I mean. As an aside, this was nominate, this could have been a nominee for my sole appearance on Ebs. I kind of wish we'd read this one instead of the one that shall not be named, which we actually read eventually. The Elusive Exclusive Book Society. Let me pick a book. It was trash. And this one, which we discarded, was not trash at all. It's well worth it. Okay, so that's a little bit about it. We'll start sort of spoilery light with the things that I did love about it. Actually, no, a bit of a rundown on what it's about. Apparently, I sometimes miss that. We start with Stephen, and he's waking up in this world, which is just like the back of the book describes. It's deserted streets, broken buildings, packs of wild dogs. Some of them have suspiciously neat scars on their head, and some have overtly metal implants in their head. And Stephen remembers that there were people, and he kind of remembers what happened to them in a way. They vanished, like his girlfriend Pamela. One day she was there, then she slowly over time became distant and less engaged, and they couldn't quite connect. And then one day she was gone, and so were most other people. So we've got Stephen is doing none of your classic post-apocalyptic last man standing type things. He's basically living miserably in the flat that he's always lived in, going out just for food. He's rummaging for tins in grocery stores, avoiding other people. He's not dealing well, shall we say. Which is fair enough. I've never been through that scenario. Who knows if I would deal well? Probably not. And then he has a series of encounters which end up with him at the university where his girlfriend Pamela used to work, and where we learn that he'd had a very experimental operation, a procedure to implant an organic brain in his head to allow for early onset Alzheimer's, dementia, I think it was Alzheimer's. So basically he underwent this procedure, and what the computer does is it records his memories for him and is always there to present them to him again, so he doesn't have the side effects of no memory. He remembers names, he remembers places, he remembers things, and perhaps he remembers them too well. Because when he ends up in a hospital bed in the university, he's talking to a young man who explains that the only people who are left in this world are ones that have something wrong, different about their brains. Now, his theory is, Hansen, I think his name is that mass consciousness, social awareness of the world slowly drifts over time. And everyone in the world has kind of simultaneously decided that the world is a different place. But the people who've got certain things happening in their brains can't go along with that. They're stuck in this world. So as all of society changes their view of the world and slowly drifts off to here to keep on doing what they've always done, but over here, some people can't leave. Stephen can't leave because he's got this computer implanted in his head that won't let him forget how things were, that won't let him shift into a new dimension. One other person called Alvarez had this same procedure, and he also probably couldn't shift into another dimension, but we don't encounter Alvarez at that stage. And Hansen himself, I think it's epilepsy that he has, and he says because his brain doesn't function like other people's brains, he too can't slide sideways into a different world. So that's where we are near the start. And at this point, I was really enjoying it. The way that science was being used here was science light, but it did a few things that you don't see that often done in books, certainly not in the 80s, and I was loving the whole idea of computers being installed in the brain to compensate for mental issues. But I particularly liked the types of computers, because these computers aren't metal computers that are being installed, they're actually organic. They're completely and utterly, basically a new part of the brain, biological brains that grow themselves, repair themselves, and maintain themselves. And there's the rub, because does Stephen really want this computer to keep maintaining itself in his brain if it means he's all alone? So Then we've got a very neat application of quantum mechanics to this scenario. So a brain operates by arranging electrical implants pulses, and these augmented brains like Stephen's can act in the world in a quantum way different to how a normal brain would be acted upon by the quantum mechanics, of which I know very little. And I don't know how much A.C. Ellis gets. And if you actually work in quantum mechanics, you may find this application annoying, but I don't, and I enjoyed it a lot. So what it turns out, that whether consciously or unconsciously, this organic brain in Stephen's head will allow him to slide through dimensions. Not only slide through dimensions, but create the dimensions that he wants, change the world. Hence the title, Worldmaker. Stephen can imagine a world in which instead of wearing a green shirt, he's wearing a white shirt. And then he can shift the modality in which he exists to that world where the change that he wants has taken place. This is not unique. It reminds me of at least one Roger Zelazny story, and other people have done things like it. I don't know anyone's done it quite the way that Worldmaker does, and I haven't read one recently, so I did very much enjoy that. Now, a bit further along in the book, Stephen meets a psychic who explains how the world works to him. Burton, I think his name's Burton. I did make a note of this. Yeah, Burton. Burton's a TV psychic in Stephen's original world, but here he's a leader of the underground, and Stephen goes to meet him, and Burton tells him how his world is, how his brain operates, and how someone else has actually changed this world to suit their purposes, and that someone is Alvarez, the other person who received a brain implant. Now here I'm getting spoiler light. I don't know that spoiler is really terribly relevant to this book. You're either going to enjoy the reading experience or you won't. I'm not going to tell you any big spoilers. I'm not going to tell you the big deals. But yes. So here we are. Stephen's with Burton. Burton's explaining how the underground operates against the emperor in the walled city, who is Alvarez, who is basically recreating the whole world the way he wants it. Now, Stephen doesn't know at this point how to intentionally change the world, but he does know that he gets a killer headache whenever he does. So he's unconvinced. And who remembers the Rubik's cubes from the 80s? They were suddenly everywhere. A little cube with different colours, you had to move it around. And I like the way Ellis uses the Rubik's cube to explain a world shift. So, or rather, his character Burton explains the world shift, and the butterfly effect. The butterfly effect over multiple dimensions. So, as he points out, this side of the cube has all these colours, but these are in this row. So if you shift this row, you never know. You're going to have the thing that you want will change, but other things will change with it. And it's quite neatly done. Stephen adopts the image of the Rubik's Cube to be the way that he visualizes changing the world around him. And that's all good too. Now, things I didn't like about it. This is a good book. I do recommend it. If you're interested so far, go find Worldmaker by A.C. Ellis. Read it, come back and say thank you because you enjoyed it. I'm pretty sure you will. Science fiction people will enjoy it. People who enjoy a more thriller type book will enjoy it as well. It's not science heavy, but the science that is there is interesting and well constructed and convincing. Our main protagonist is quite interesting. It's no hardship to follow him around his journey. Things I didn't like. Now, this might be spoilery. So, after Stephen meets Burton, Burton tells him that he has to go up and fight Alvarez, who has changed this world into an image of his that he wants the world to be, with his walled city and everything. Why he needs to fight Alvarez is never really explained. Burton claims that Alvarez doesn't care about changing the world and he's hurting people or something like that. And with very little discussion, argument, qualitative thinking, Stephen goes, oh, okay, I better go fight Alvarez then. And you know what? No sane human would, on so little reasoning, accept the word of someone they don't know who is a bit threatening and isn't treating them nicely, to go off and do something that is pretty dramatic and which they don't even know if they can do. So Stephen swallowing this, you must fight Alvarez, good guy versus bad guy, and the good guy knows the bad guy is battle. This did not make sense. And from that point onward, it was a little bit meh because of that. The final battle at the end seemed entirely manufactured and completely pointless. I get that in the 80s, various storytelling traditions were different, but I think many readers would prefer some reason why you have to battle to the death with this guy who controls Black Panthers. I would have liked something. The description of the castle is great. Apparently Alvarez in real life was an architect. A lot of the visualizations that A.C. Ellis gives us of the worlds that Stephen travelled through are very organic, very convincing. Again, with that slightly mystery thriller effect of grungy hotels and a pawn shop and walking through the park and it's all cold and grey. And then when Stephen actually goes to Alvarez's castle, he actually stops and comments to his companion, "Wait, does this feel a bit like a Frank Frazetta cover?" And I liked that. I'm sure that was, of course, intentional, and it was fun. I liked it. It was humorful and it was cute. Now, another thing that I didn't hate it, but aside from the hysterical way in which Stephen accepts Burton's unvalidated claims, is one of the tactics that Ellis uses to describe Stephen's changing through the world. And early on, these changes happen beyond his control, unexpectedly as it were. But later on, within his control and intentionally. So in the beginning, before the world vanishes and Stephen is all alone in the deserted streets with the wild dogs chasing him through the grocery store, his girlfriend is Pamela. She's described as a honey blonde with a boyish figure and cold blue eyes, and she doesn't sound very loving or very nice, and one has to wonder why they're still hanging out together. Pamela becomes a symbol for his travel through the worlds. At first she becomes short-haired and more platinum blonde, and then Stephen wakes up in a reality where she's got red hair and they have 2 kids and are very happy together. And Stephen himself metamorphoses as to who he is. He starts off as being a musician, just a musician in a local club, and his mother, who died just a couple of years ago, is always berating him for not finishing his education, in which case he could have played in the Boston Opera or whatever. In another one, he does actually become the conductor for the Boston Opera. In another one, he becomes a jazz musician. In his happiest life, with the Pamela who he loves and who loves him and who has kids, he is actually, I think, a self-employed electronics engineer. Anyway, there's all these manifestations of Pamela. And after we've gone through every colour of blonde that Pamela could possibly be, we then transfer to this other girl who's slowly modified from short hair to long hair to gender preferences, and slowly we see her slowly being made over into a kind of Pamela. I can't say it terribly bothered me, but I found it noticeable, this attitude to Pamela and later Sylvia as the narrator, as it were, of his travel through worlds and changing things. It was a bit naff. Didn't hate it, didn't love it, still thinking about it. Would have to read this again to form a certain opinion about the Pamela effect. But other than that, and if you can swallow this, "Oh, I must be a superhero here to kill the supervillain," because Burton said so, a man he doesn't know, has no reason to trust. And it's not a spoiler to say that Burton isn't trustworthy. The whole second half of the book, I'm going, this is clearly an untrustworthy person to be following. Something bad's going to happen. Something does. That is not a spoiler. Any experienced reader will see that coming 3/4 of the book away. But what exactly it is might surprise you a bit. Didn't love the ending. Didn't hate the ending. It was a way to end. In every other regard, I would say this is a really pretty good book. As science fiction, unexpected science fiction books go, this was fun, it was well written, it had a great concept, it moved through the concept fast. I have no complaints about this. It's definitely a 3 out of 5 stars, and after a bit more consideration, having thought about it for a little bit longer, it may even well end up being a 3.5 stars. It didn't rock my world, but I've got really little to criticize about it. And I have to say, it seems a bit odd to me that fewer people aren't talking about A.C. Ellis. Like I said, I've never heard of this author before, and they're very good at what they do. Would definitely read more by them. I might even go so far as to seek out some of their more recent science fiction and see what they're doing in the 2000s. So, thank you for watching. Thank you to everyone who voted in my ABC. Thank you for voting for this particular E. Worldmaker by A.C. Ellis was a definite win, and we should all read good books.